Hey, everybody, welcome to Grilling at the Green, proudly part of the Golf News Network. I'm JT, your host, and the big question every week, of course, is how's your game? We want to thank the folks before we get into the show, as normal, to the Oregon Crab Commission from sea to plate. If you've never had Oregon Dungeness crab or Dungeness crab anywhere on the West Coast, it's marvelous. I highly recommend it. And also our good friends at Painted Hills Natural Beef, beef the way nature intended. You can go to paintedhillsbeef.com, excuse me. You can actually order online or find out if there's a grocer in your area. So my question to everybody is, do you think you could play 100 or the 100 top courses in the U.S. in 1 year? Now, I think that's a pretty big bucket list item. My guest today, Jimmie James, actually did that. Jimmie also wrote a book about it and his life and his journey there called Playing from the Rough. Jimmie, welcome.
Thanks, Jeff, for having me on. Love the opportunity to talk about my story.
I love your story. Okay. So the obvious first question out of the gate is, what prompted you to try such a feat? The top 100 courses, according to Golf Digest, in 1 year. Most golfers don't play that much in 3 years.
Well, I was getting ready to retire, and the reason for retiring at a young age of 58 was a job that had me on the road quite a bit for many years, and I'd missed so much of our kids' lives.
Yeah.
And I wanted to spend more time with them before they headed off to college. So during their high school years. But I knew I couldn't go from a 100-mile-an-hour executive, globe-trotting executive job to an idle retirement. So I needed something to bridge that gap, to make that transition. So what I thought about were all the times I used to travel across the country when I was young, didn't have a family, early in my career, wasn't as demanding, just talking with people everywhere I went. So I thought I'd reconnect with the country during my first year of retirement. I'd go to all 50 states, play 2 courses in each state, one with friends, one with strangers. But before I could develop that plan, my wife gave me a book by John Sabino, where he played the 100 best or top courses in the world over his lifetime. So it became just a math problem to me. I said, well, I'm going to play 100 courses. Why not just play the 100 best? Why not see if I can't get access without ever directly asking to the 100 most exclusive and best golf courses in the country and do it all in a year? I bet no one's done it in a year. And there wasn't much more thought to it than that. It wasn't some long time fantasy or a lot of planning and thought put in it beyond that moment.
I think you were wise to not try to transition from 100 miles an hour to 0 miles an hour at home, or 30, as you said it. Not to interject myself in this, but I spent 37 years flying around the world doing in my other job. And then when I retired from that 8 years ago or so, I kind of went wham. So it will, word to the wise out there, it will hit you. Jimmie, growing up in East Texas, you didn't have very much, to put it mildly. Were your dreams and aspirations as a child something like you did with becoming an engineer, working for a world's largest oil company, or one of them, and then that, or what were your dreams as a kid?
I didn't have specific dreams because I didn't know enough about the world to dream specific things like that.
Yeah.
I lived in a very small corner of the world in a sawmill quarters after being born in the deep woods of East Texas. And when you talk about not having much, we probably had to gain quite a bit to get to the level of not having much. That was a climb. That was a climb for us. So we lived in a shack, no plumbing or electricity, tin roof shack. What we ate, we either raised, grew, or killed, drew water from a well, bath water from a pond with the ticklish wiggles of tadpoles.
Yeah.
It was Spartan, a Spartan type of life. But And we loved our lives in the sense of we created childhoods out of nothing.
Yeah.
But I knew that there still had to be something different. And my occasional forays outside our small world gave me a glimpse of a different life. And so I didn't know exactly what created that different life for others. But what I did know is that there wasn't anyone around me who had graduated from high school. So at 5 years old, I set a goal to graduate from high school, not knowing anyone who had done so already. So what my life has always been marked by is setting ambitious goals. Later, I had aspirations of what type of career to have, but that came
Sure.
much later in life.
Well, you've come a long way from hitting a plastic doll's head with a sawmill slat. Were you able to sit back and reflect on where you came from and what you've accomplished during the process of the 100 courses and writing this book?
A part of what really prompted me to write the book was just the contrast and comparisons and thoughts that I had as I found myself in places I never could have imagined or dreamed of as a child. And it's really the impetus for the book was, wow, what an amazing story. What an amazing country we live in, where I could go from the type of life I was born into and find myself at these places of privilege
Yeah.
that I didn't even know existed when I was a kid and never could have even imagined. And so thinking about that contrast and thinking about who we are as a country, and we're not perfect. We have a lot of challenges, and it's up to us to make us a more perfect union. But I can think of nowhere else. I traveled the world as a businessman, and I can think of nowhere else where if you're confronted by challenges created by the society you live in, that there are so many pathways that are also made available to you to overcome those challenges. So those thoughts, and as I went to all these places and the contrast, it was like when I was at Augusta National, it just, the thought came into my mind of born into a world that lacked almost everything, to find myself standing in a world that lacked almost nothing. And it's hard for me to grasp that. It's hard for me to grasp running around dirty and stinky with bathing only once a week as a kid in the sawmill quarters, playing baseball with a stick or a
Yeah.
slat that had drifted down to us from the sawmill up the hill, and smacking that doll's head or etching hopscotch squares into the dirt. Those things, we created our world. And to go from that to the life that I find myself in now, it's just hard to conceive of. And so I was constantly reminded of that as I went to these places. And some of the experiences I had would spur additional reflections on my earlier life.
Sure. Well, one thing about growing up with nothing, I think, is you become a creative person in their own right. Kids do, because you didn't, you couldn't run down to the sporting goods store and spend $10 in those days or 15 and buy a new Rawlings baseball glove or anything like that. That wasn't even on the table, so you had to create ways to keep yourself entertained. And I actually think that the people I know that, now that I know you too, but people I know where I grew up was not, a really overly wealthy community. And we grew up in the country by a creek, and we played pirates and did all kinds of stuff like that. You had to make your own fun, really.
Yes, you did. And there are times, actually, Jeff, that I get a little nostalgic for the simplicity of it all.
Yeah.
And I do attribute my upbringing to the style of engineer I became. Very practical solutions for problems,
Mm-hmm.
and thinking my way through what is the most effective, efficient way to address this technical problem we have. Of course, I gain the understanding of the basic sciences from my professors at Prairie View A&M University when I was an engineering student there. And they also helped me learn how to navigate a world that I hadn't been prepared for by my early life. And
Mhm.
that is being a Black man in a career that there were few of us that had gone into before.
Right.
And working within the corporate world. The corporate world had just really started to open up for opportunities for African American engineers when I graduated from college in the early 80s.
Yeah. We're going to take a break. We're going to be back with Jimmie James, the author of Playing from the Rough, and hear more of his phenomenal story right after this. Please stay with us. Welcome back to Grilling at the Green. I'm JT. We want to thank you for listening here. This is the part of the show every week, and I did give Jimmie a heads up on this, where we do a travel tip sponsored by our good friends at Weston Kia here in Portland. And knowing that Jimmie's flown, I actually figured it out last night. I think you've flown 1,000,000 miles more than I have, something like that. I was doing the calculations out of your book and looking at my stuff. Anyway, there's always a good travel tip, and it doesn't always necessarily have to do with airplanes. What would yours be after doing this marathon golf outing?
Related to the marathon golf outing is never take the last flight to the city you're going to, because when they leave your bag behind, there's another flight that can get it to you so that you're using your own clubs the next day.
Yeah.
Always have a plan B if that flight gets canceled. Now, I'll tell you, my plan B did not comprehend once when I was in Tulsa. I made sure that there was going to be another flight after my flight. The problem is my flight took off. We had engine problems and had to come back to the gate. And that other contingency flight had already taken off.
Oh, yeah. Been there, done that. That's a good travel tip, and we want to thank the folks at Weston Kia for that. I can't tell you how many times I told somebody, and you've heard this type of little limerick. I said, "Yeah, I spent a week once in Cleveland overnight." It was just, there was no flights. You were done. You were not going home that day. One of the things I noticed in the book, Jimmie, you seem to make yourself into Jimmie James super salesman. Okay. And I was impressed with that in your teenage and college years. Do you think of yourself maybe now in a manner of super salesman, perhaps for golf?
I think that I learned at a very age the importance of being able to sell your ideas. And when I got ready to make this odyssey across the country, it didn't frighten me that I was going to not only have to sell my idea, but have to also sell myself in a sense. Because there are, I think, two important elements
Hmm.
for being able to accomplish this journey. And that is, you have to meet people that have the opportunity and the resources to get you connected to people that will invite you to courses. Because my objective was to get invited to all of these courses without ever directly asking for an invite, without ever directly asking for help.
Right.
And so I had to not only sell the idea of becoming the very first person ever to play all of America's 100 greatest courses in 365 days. Then I had to sell myself as someone worthy of that help. And when I say sell myself, I don't mean project something that's inauthentic. I mean, be the best version of myself that I am. And people have to like you, basically,
Yeah.
and just be a likable person. And my whole life is, people have liked me. I don't know why. I actually say it to my wife. I really don't know why, but all I do is I'm just me. And it was all about just being me. And people were just kind and generous, and they were sucked into my dream, and they wanted to help.
Well, that's the reason though. You were just you. That's the basic human premise, I think, where you can get along with somebody no matter who they are, what they look like, whatever, if they're just real about and their own selves. That's not too many people do that anymore, Jimmie. I'm going to tell you. Of course, I'm you and I are only a couple of years apart, and I sometimes I scratch my head and wonder what's happening out there, but that's a different show for a different topic and a different day. Um, you completed your quest in 2018. How long was it before you decided to write Playing from the Rough, and how long did that take you?
I decided during the quest that this seemed like an amazing story.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is that there were all of these small stories. And so the question was, were there enough of those stories about my life, about the golf adventure? And could I tell those stories in a compelling way that would get people to turn page after page after page? So I decided during the quest that I really would like to write a book to tell this story. And it was really for three reasons. One, to celebrate my mother, to honor my mother
Mm-hmm.
for the principles she instilled in us. Two, so that my kids would know who we are and where we came from. And three, for our country, actually, as corny as it sounds, meeting people and connecting with them dissipates hate. When we can find our common humanity, and golf is just such a great venue for that. You spend 4 hours with people. You really get to know them very well. They really get to know you very well. And so I'd like to write a book where every reader of that book could find a piece of themselves in the stories that I tell and find a way to connect to me and see our common humanity. And if that could happen for someone whose life is as different from theirs as mine is, perhaps they'd be more open to doing it with other people that they didn't know.
Is there one character? We got about a minute left before we have to go to break, Jimmie. So I'll tell you that. Is there one character? Because there's a lot of them that you talk about in the book that you met that really has stuck with you. I mean, they all stick with you to a degree, but is there one that you just went, yeah, that's the guy?
Yeah, Jeff Johnson and I've become pretty good friends. Jeff is the president of Flint Hills National.
Mm-hmm.
And early on, I played 3 courses, counting Flint Hills. And Jeff just embraced me, introduced me to a lot of people that could help. He was all in from the first moment. And Jeff and I remain really good friends. I joined Flint Hills. He invited me to join the club. And he remained really good friends. And he helped throughout my quest. He was the only person that I accepted help from for more than 3 courses. My goal was to see if people would, as I said earlier, buy into my dream and offer to help. So I wanted to do that with as many people as possible. So I limited help to no more than 3 courses from any one individual. The exception was Jeff Johnson, or JJ as we called him. Like you're JT, he's JJ.
There you go. There you go. We're going to take a break. I'm going to be back with Jimmie James, author of Playing from the Rough. We're going to talk about some more interesting stuff coming right up. Please stay with us. Welcome back to Grilling at the Green. I'm JT, along today with Jimmie Johnson. Jimmie Johnson. I don't know why I was thinking about football before we came on the air today.
And then I just put Johnson in your mind.
In my mind
with
too.
Jeff
So
Johnson.
Jimmie James, how's that? Jimmie's the author of Playing from the Rough. And for those of you listening in Portland and Seattle, I will tell you this, that on June 21st, which is a Friday evening, Jimmie's going to be at the University of Washington in the library giving a talk and with his books and telling his story right there. Also on June 21st, that morning, he's going to be here in Portland on AM Northwest. And then we're going to film a little segment with him afterwards. Then on June 22nd, he's coming back from Seattle to see me. He just can't get enough of me. He's going to be at Powell's bookstore at 3 p.m., and I will be there with him. And then on June 23rd, he's up at Sahali. He's playing in the KPMG, and we don't know his exact tee time, but sometime between 7:30 and 9:30 in the morning. That's a busy weekend for you, my friend.
It's a busy weekend. Just a couple of things on that. The book talk at the University of Washington will be at their bookstore.
Oh, okay.
It'll be at that bookstore at 6 p.m. that Friday evening. And I'm going to play. I may have given you the wrong dates on the KPMG when I'm playing in two pro-ams. So there's one I'm playing in with the executives of KPMG and possibly their ambassador that's an LPGA player or some other LPGA player on the 18th. That's on the 18th, the morning of the 18th. That's a Holly. And then we're raising money for the second Black woman to play on the LPGA Tour, Renee Powell,
Yes.
and a golf course that her father built in Ohio, the only golf course ever built, designed, built, operated, and owned by an African American in the country. That is actually on the 24th at
Okay.
Sahali.
Yeah. Dr. Powell's been on the show before, and I really enjoyed our interview with her. That's been several years ago, but I really enjoyed that.
Yes, she's an
So,
outstanding person.
yes, she is. So Jimmie, in playing from the rough, I noticed that when you experienced what some people would consider uncomfortable situations, and maybe you hit less than a perfect shot. Geez, that happens to all of us. You refer back to your childhood at times with not so pleasant memories. Is that kind of were you feeling, as you quote in the book, or you say kind of invisible? You're not invisible, but feeling of inadequacy. What made that leap mentally for you for bad shot to bad childhood memories or memories that maybe weren't so pleasant?
So I think the big issue goes back to my birth certificate. And the first time I saw that when I started school as a 6-year-old going into first grade, there was no Head Start or kindergarten for
Yeah.
kids like me. And to see a birth certificate with the most prominent features being colored and illegitimate. So at the time, colored denoted second-class citizen. It was in the Jim Crow era, the late Jim Crow era in East Texas. And then illegitimate was that I didn't legally exist. So it was this sense of inadequacy, worthlessness. And for some reason, that's just triggered if I perform poorly. It just triggers back to that sense of inadequacy,
Right.
of illegitimacy. So I've always been driven to really perform well, that if I'm going to do something, to really work really hard at doing that something well, to gain that sense of legitimacy.
You speak very plainly in the book, which, by the way, if you can't figure this out, folks, I highly recommend that you get the book and read it. And if you go to one of the book signings, Jimmie will sign it for you, of course. But you speak very plainly about racism you experienced in your life at times, and more subtly in golf. Starting your golf journey, did you expect to experience that?
Honestly, I was concerned that I would experience it. And
Yeah.
I thought it would be the determinant factor on whether I'd get on to all these courses. And it really wasn't though. There may have been some very slight things that I initially thought may have been racially motivated.
Mm-hmm.
But I talk in the book too about how all slights, not all slights, are really intentional or have anything to do with race. So for the most part, I really didn't experience that on the journey. And a part of it may also be I played a lot of the most exclusive, privileged places with very respected members. And not only would it have been disrespectful to me, it certainly also would have been disrespectful to that member to not treat their guests with the utmost respect.
Right.
Everywhere I went, for the most part, I was treated well. And in some places, like Oak Hill in Rochester, I was celebrated. They even put together, they gave me a commemorative bag tag. And
Oh, good.
yeah, Jimmy James top 100 golf courses and the date that I played at Oak Hill. And then when I came back a year later, a year or two later, they gave me a book that had been put together on their renovation. So they really celebrated me that, and quickly, and then we can move on.
Sure.
But the other thing I'd say about that is I did a blog during my quest. And on Oak Hill, I wrote, a Black, a Jew, and two Italians walk into Oak Hill Country Club, and nobody notices or says a thing, and they go out and play. And the reason that's interesting is neither of us would have been able to be a member or play at that course decades earlier.
Right.
And that shows the progress. Doesn't say the problems have been solved, because they haven't. There are still challenges, but progress has been made. And that was an example of the progress that's been made.
Kind of like the Rat Pack trying to play at Los Angeles Country Club 50 years ago, you know?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Um, Jimmie, you seem to gain a lot of strength from your mom. You already mentioned her briefly in that. What was the most valuable lesson she shared with you?
I'd say the two most valuable lessons, if you don't mind.
Sure.
One is never quit. That is, I never saw her quit. No matter how hard things got, she'd find a way to overcome it. From the simplest of things to the most complex of things. When our stepfather abandoned us, just disappeared, just left one day, supposedly for work, and never came back. Well, I should say he came back a few years later, but never, for all practical purposes, he just disappeared.
Yeah.
And we went on welfare until my mother could get trained as a nurse's aide. And she scrubbed linoleum floors and empty bedpans to show us the value of work and the importance that it was her responsibility, no one else's, to take care of us. She didn't make a lot of money, and most of the money she made went to paying a cab to take her back and forth to work. But it wasn't about that. So our lifestyle didn't change from her working. What changed was our understanding of responsibility.
Sure.
And then the other trait was integrity. And it was just a simple story. When I was a kid, she sent me to the store to buy some items from the store. She gave me like $5. But the clerk at the store gave me change for a 10. And when I got home with everything my mother had sent me to get and more money than I left with, her response was, "You know we don't steal." And I said, "But Mama, I didn't steal it. She made a mistake." "Yes, and you knew she made a mistake and you didn't correct it. Go back to that store, give her that money back, and apologize to her for not giving the money back when she gave you too much." And that was a long walk. I show
I
my
bet.
kids that walk when we go back to that town, so they could see what I went through and what life was like for me in my early years. I showed them that walk. I was about 10 years old at the time. I showed them that walk, and it's like 2 blocks, but it felt like a mile.
Oh, I bet it did.
Especially the walk back to the store to give the
Yeah,
money back and apologize. But do the right thing always. The hardest part should be figuring out the right thing to do, but once you know the right thing to do, do it.
absolutely. I bet you your feet felt like they had concrete blocks on them walking back there.
Absolutely.
We're going to take another break. We're going to be back with Jimmie James, author of Playing from the Rough. I've got pages, literally pages of questions, and we'll have to pick it up in the after hours portion. But Jimmie and I will come back and wrap up the show in just a minute. Please stay with us. Welcome back to Grilling at the Green. I'm JT. We're very fortunate today to have Jimmie James with us. His book's coming out here, Playing from the Rough. Again, we'd like to thank the folks at Oregon Dungeness Crab Commission, also Hammerstall Knives and Heritage Cookware. If you haven't picked up on this, Jimmie, I also am a big in cooking and barbecue and stuff like that, but and not just from my size, maybe from the reach of the show there. I was going to tell you too. This is a little footnote I put in my notes here. Side note, tell Jimmie you never ask a woman how she knows. I speak of what I knoweth.
The most foolish words ever uttered by any man when his wife is in labor.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you know?
How do you know?
I'm
You want to
surprised.
tell people what you're talking about there?
I'm going to let you tell them because
Okay. So yeah, my wife, we were about to give birth. My wife was about to give birth to our second child. We'd gone to she woke up that morning. She said, "Today's the day." So we got ready. We went to her um, gynecologist's office, and they said, "Yep, today's the day. Go across the street to the hospital. It's going to be a while. Take your time, relax. But I hope it happens before the afternoon because I've got a class to teach today," is what her OBGYN said. So we go over to the hospital. They start running a nice warm bath for her to relax in. And she asks for something for the pain. The nurse says, I have to examine you to make sure we got time because I can't give you anything within an hour of delivery.
yeah.
So the nurse examines her. Oh, we got plenty of time. Gives her a couple of pain pills, leaves the room. Soon as the nurse walks out of the room, my wife, Erica, goes, "The baby's coming." That's when I uttered those foolish words. How do you know?
How do you
And at
know?
that moment, from some place no man ever wants to go, this sound came out that said, "Get somebody now." So I go to the nurse's station and I don't want to embarrass myself. Remember this feeling of inadequacy. You got to be right on
Yeah.
understanding what's going on. So I said, "My wife said the baby's coming." We go back into the room, the baby's crowning. Immediately, the nurse tells me to wash up. She pushes the call button. Before anybody else could come into the room, the nurse and I had rotated our daughter and delivered her.
Yep. Yep.
That's where those foolish words came from.
I read that and I literally busted out laughing. I did. I went, "Oh, brother." Not giving you a hard time because it just brought back memories of certain things in my life. And every guy who reads that book, your book, I should say, is gonna know that too. It's just a common thread there. By the way, we got a couple minutes left in the regular show here, Jimmie. I put this picture behind me because Bandon Dunes is a kind of a special place for you.
It is.
And your wife and Erica.
The Oregon coast holds a special place and will always hold a special place in my heart. So I'm so thankful to Mike Kaiser for building such wonderful golf courses along that splendid Oregon coast.
Yeah.
About 300 miles north of there, not straight up the coast, but a little inland from the coast, along the Columbia River Gorge, is where my wife informed me that we were about to become parents. She had a pregnancy test that she'd kept with her for that moment. She knows that nature, being in nature, that's the song of my heart.
Yeah.
And she wanted to, while we were in this beautiful, splendid place, let me know that we were about to become parents. So the Oregon coast will always hold a special place for me. It was where I learned we'd become parents. 9 months later, a little less than 9 months later, our first child, Jordan, was born.
And you didn't ask the question, how do you know?
Now, on that one, I did not ask the question, how do you know? What I did ask on that one was I asked the doctor, why do you call it catch when you're receiving a baby? And he said, young fella, wash up. Then he said, stand here, put on these gloves, stand here. And I learned why you call it catch.
Yes.
Our firstborn went straight from my wife's womb directly to my heart,
Yep.
into
Yep.
my hands and directly to my heart.
Yep. I get it. Jimmie is going to stick around for after hours, but again, he's going to be at the University of Washington on June 21st at their bookstore, 6 o'clock, I believe. Also on AM Northwest in Portland on the 21st. I don't know what segment he'll be in, but it'll be sometime between 9 and 10. And then on the 22nd, again, back to Portland, Powell's Bookstore at 3 p.m. for talk and book signing. I'll be there. I'll be kind of acting as Jimmie's moderator. And he's got all kinds of stuff going on. But Jimmie, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me. And folks, I highly recommend Playing from the Rough. I really do.
And thank you, JT, for all of your help, for agreeing to moderate that session at Powell's, and the help you provided along the way to introduce me to folks across the Northwest.
No problem. No problem. We're going to get out of here. It's Father's Day. Go out and do something nice for your dad for Father's Day, or maybe just leave him alone. That might even be better. You never know. Until next time, go out, play some golf, have some fun, and most importantly, be kind, everybody. Take care. Hey, everybody. Welcome to After Hours here on Grilling at the Green. I'm JT. It's been a great show. That's all I can say as the regular show. And I need to explain this to Jimmie. The part we just did was the radio part only. This is now the podcast web version that continues on ad infinitum. So we just keep going with that. Okay. I wanted to ask you about Dr. Doctor and Dr. Doctor Jr. Now this is from Prairie View A&M, and I think anybody that went to college and took was involved in science, one of the sciences, doesn't matter which one, we all had a professor like Dr. Doctor at somewhere along the line. But not too many of us that I know of had Dr. Doctor Jr. too. You want to explain that? It's pretty funny, actually.
I probably could have been a little bit more specific in the book and talking about the fact that Doctor son, Doctor Jr., Doctor Jr. got his PhD and became a Doctor Jr.
Yeah.
I never took a class from Doctor Jr., only from Doctor. But we had some very colorful professors. There was Doctor, there was Dr. Freddie Frazier, who would say, I'm going to put my initials on your test. I'm going to flunk you twice. FF.
Yep.
But it was all to help us learn to deal with the challenges that we would have going into a world that wasn't really designed for Black professional engineers. So they were hard on us. And in addition, as I mentioned earlier, in addition to teaching us the basic sciences and how to solve problems, that was another thing they would say is, somebody would ask, are these going to be are these the problems that are going to be on the test? And they say, all these problems have already been solved. Nobody's going to pay you to solve these problems that are with answers at the back of the book. The problems you're going to solve haven't even developed yet. So you need to learn the fundamentals and how to apply the sciences to new problems that don't even exist yet. But they really prepared us well to be successful as engineers in a world that wasn't always ready for us.
I also gather you don't have much of a future as an a cappella singer.
No, no, I don't really have some of my siblings do. And when we gather on the holidays and sway from side to side and singing, um, I'd always be off key. I also don't have the rhythm to dance well either. I, I'm serious in the book when I say I have no special talents. The only real talent I have is I never quit, perseverance.
Yeah.
And it's
Well,
forged from the life of where even the simplest of things were hard.
I think, Jimmie, though, knowing that you don't have specific talents is a talent in a way. So you can kind of maneuver through and not get yourself in trouble. Um, what's the biggest thing you learned about playing golf on this journey?
Golf is hard.
Golf is hard.
Golf is hard. When I was there at that place with that picture you have, that photograph you have behind you, when I was at
Yeah.
Bandon, I was sitting out at the grill, out on the patio at the grill at Pacific Dunes. And I struck up a conversation with this guy. He was actually playing the top public courses, every public course that had been on a top 100 list. It was his goal over his lifetime. He was an attorney from Washington, D.C., John. And John's goal was to play every uh, public course that had been on the top 100 list. And so he asked me, what do you think it takes to do what you're trying to do? And I said, it takes at least three things: time, resources, and an understanding spouse. He said,
Yeah.
there's a fourth thing. I said, what's that? He said, humility.
Yeah.
There are going to be days where no matter how hard you try, you're going to play really, really bad golf. And you've got to learn to not be embarrassed from playing bad golf. And I would say that's the thing I got more and more comfortable with because of this feeling of inadequacy when performing poorly. And that would bother me. I'd start off, make a par, a birdie, go a few holes, and then have one bad shot. And that would get in my head and I couldn't recover.
Right. Right.
I got more and more comfortable with the fact that golf is hard and you're going to have bad shots, and it doesn't mean that you're inadequate.
Yeah. Isn't it amazing when you're playing and you go out, like you said, you do par, birdie, even a bogey's not too bad,
Right.
depending on the hole and all, and you hit one shot that is just memorable. I mean, it comes off the club face just sweet and perfect, and it flies exactly where you want it to. Maybe it gets within a few feet or inches of the cup. You're all that, and you get all kind of puffed up about it, maybe not physically, but in your mind. And then you go out one and you shank one right into the weed off the
Yep.
next tee or your second shot. It has a way of, like you and John were saying, it's keeping you humble.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. If you play golf at all, I think, and just my opinion, but if you play it with any regularity, you've got to appreciate what the pros can do.
Right.
Yeah.
That I gained so much greater of an appreciation for their ability for 72 holes to focus on every shot, on every hole for 4 rounds in a row. It's just phenomenal.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not, well, if you look at like Tiger and Phil and those upper echelons, Jack, all through history, they were almost robotic at times. They were impenetrable, I guess would
Yeah.
be the word, when they were on the course. Um, I want to go back to something you said in the book towards the end of the book, and I don't want to give away all the stories because we want to help people to buy the book and stuff. But I think it was Erica it was Erica had told you can't change culture if you're not at the table.
Right.
And that really struck me as really profound because
Yes.
it's so subtle yet so powerful.
Yeah, that came up when I was deciding whether I was going to go on a hunting trip
Mm-hmm.
to a company facility down in South Texas. My whole career, I I tried to be clear that I didn't want to be a part of, say, the good old boy network, and um, feeling like I didn't fit in, like I didn't belong, was a feeling I didn't want anyone else to have.
Right.
And so I didn't want to participate in anything that whether it actually did or not, it's a different story, but whether I thought anything that I thought perhaps was exclusionary. And so I debated whether I should go on the trip. I was invited to go. I debated whether I should go. And when I talked to my wife, who's in academia, PhD in organizational behavior, she said, you can't make a change if you're not at the table. You can't
Right.
help something progress if you're not at the table. And that really works with a lot of things, JT. When you think about our country and the challenges that we face and people not willing to listen to other people's point of view, is if you can't change your own mind, how are you going to change somebody else's mind
Yeah.
on anything? And so people that won't listen to a different point of view. I want to hear all points of view. I was at a conference for eco modernists, their environmental group. And this guy says something to me that really, to me, was profound. He said every year he goes back and thinks about how many times during that year did he change his mind on something. And the higher the number he can come up with, the better he feels about himself, because he says that means I'm still growing. So I started that practice.
Hmm. I've
Um,
never. I think that's great. Actually, very good. Um, does Erica play golf?
she's starting. She had an epiphany. She's been playing off and on, but not really serious about it. But she had a epiphany this a week and a half ago. We went
Yeah.
out and played. She got a lesson at one of my clubs, Pikewood National, Morgantown, West Virginia. Beautiful. Google Pikewood National. It's heaven. And she got a lesson when we were there and loved the lesson. And we went out and played 9 holes a few days later. And the epiphany she had was, I get it. It's been a rough year for academics,
Sure.
for leadership in academics.
Yes.
And she said, for the first time in 9 months, I went an hour and a half without a single thought about work. For the first time, she says, I've not gone 5 minutes. But during this hour and a half we were out here on the golf course, I didn't think about work once. I now understand. I get it. So
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but yeah, it's I'm married to an academic too, who recently retired, then got a contract back, uh, and then it's just tough on them right now, So I can appreciate that. And I can also appreciate, you might appreciate this, Jimmie. Over the years, my wife, who does not play golf, has had more sets of clubs than I have.
well, I have a lot of sets, but my wife, who does not play golf, has 3 sets of clubs.
Yeah. Yeah.
One at our place in Atlanta, one in Philly, and one at our place in Kiowa Island, South Carolina. She has 3 sets of clubs, 3 pairs of golf shoes, one for each set
Yep.
that
I
she
get
has.
I
And
get that. I get
yeah,
that.
and
Uh
she has a lot of really cute golf clothing.
yeah, I get
So
that
she's a
too.
fashionista. Unfortunately, Jeff, I have a live show that's going to start in about 5 minutes. I think they scheduled this with you for an hour, and
We've gone over
looks like.
that. Yeah, I think we've gone over that. We usually do, but it's okay.
So we've got a couple of minutes. Anything that you haven't asked? You know, I used to do this on my work trips when I went to get a thing at have someone present to me stewardship.
Yeah.
And I'd ask them all these questions, and then I'd go, "What question were you most afraid I was going to ask you?" That I didn't ask. What question are you most interested in asking that you haven't asked yet?
Okay. If this is and what we call after hours, this is called lightning round. So I'll ask you a couple quick ones. If you could play golf with a historical figure, who would it be? And they don't have to be just historical in the world of golf, could be anybody, and we'll make them magically be able to play the game. But who would it be?
I'd love to play a round of golf with Dr. Martin Luther King. I don't know if he ever played golf, but there are just so many questions I'd ask because I think he is, of course, one of the most significant figures in history.
Right.
And so unfortunately, my call is coming in, but I think he's one of the most. Can we pause for a second?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Hello? This is Jimmie. Do we have like 1 minute or do we have to go now because it's live? You want to what? Okay. Okay. And how many minutes do I have before I have to be there? Yeah, okay. And the email address is JIMEJAYMES@AOL.com. Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay, sorry about that. So we got some minutes. Dr. King, I mean, I think our country, there's an inflection point for our country created by the life of Dr. King.
Yes. Yes. What you'll like this one, I hope. What is something your spouse was right about, but you still think she was wrong?
I'm going to tell you, she's not wrong about many things at all.
Okay.
She's pretty right, especially when it comes to people. So I don't know that I have an answer to that one.
It's a tough one. You have to
That's a tough one.
you have to strain a little bit.
Yeah.
Who in your life, in this case, besides your mother and Erica, has had the biggest influence on you?
Mr. Calvin had a really big influence on me. Mr. Calvin was my 6th grade math teacher. In Mr. Calvin's class, I really learned how useful and practical math was. My love for math really blossomed in his class. I lived a dream life sort of vicariously through math by creating math problems and solving them with everyday practical things. And that's basically what engineering is. It's being able to solve complex issues in a very practical manner.
Like toilet problems.
Yeah.
You have to read the book to figure that one out, folks.
Yes.
Last thing, if you could instantly master a musical instrument, what would it be?
Violin.
I've got one. You want to
The
borrow it?
the people who make that thing sing just so impress me.
Oh, absolutely. Have we got time for one more?
Just one more, and then I've got to jump off.
Okay, Jimmie, if you were declared supreme leader of golf for one day, just one day, what would you decree as supreme leader?
I decree that if you're 50 yards out from the hole and you hit the pin, if you're 50 yards or more out from the hole and you hit the pin is a continuation of the hole and you're considered holed out.
There
that's
you go.
too big of a penalty. You hit a great shot from 175 yards. It hits the pin and bounces off the pin into the water. That's a big penalty for such a great shot.
That is. Jimmie, do me a favor. Hold up your book to the camera. There you go. It's Playing from the Rough, folks. Jimmie James, he's going to be out here in the Northwest in a little over a week. And Jimmie, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff.
Okay.
Look forward to seeing you next week.
You got it. We'll be back next week. And everybody go out, play golf, be kind, and take care. See you later.